Jennifer from Fiber Flux. Welcome back to the 2018 Fiber Flux Spring Crochet Along. We are making the Springy Stripes Blanket, and here is the blanket right here. So for week 2, we're going to be doing the actual beginning part of the blanket. Now last week we talked about the introduction to the project, all of the supplies needed. Okay, so today we're going to be starting at the bottom point of the blanket and working our way up. Now next week for week 3, we're going to bring it back in and work back up to the point. So let me just show you what we'll be doing today. Here is, let me just kind of drape it this way. Here is the bottom of our blanket, and as you can see, I'm working on mine. We got ends everywhere. But this is the bottom of the blanket. So we're going to be starting right here at this bottom point and working our way up, changing colors, and doing it that way. Now when we get to the top, the widest part of our blanket, in week 3, I'm going to show you how to bring it back in. So in this week, we're going to do the increase part of our blanket, and then I'm going to also show you how to change colors. So lots of stuff to do. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so for today's tutorial, we're going to need the 6.5mm K crochet hook, tapestry needle, scissors, and your yarn. Now last week we talked about the supplies in much more detail. So if you're just joining us, hop back over to week 1 of the crochet along, and I'll put the link down below and you can learn all about the supplies. So I grabbed one of the colors and the supplies that we'll need today. Today we're going to learn how to do the first part of our blanket. So the corner to corner, now I've started one to show you, and then we're going to make the beginnings of another one together so you can learn the stitch work. But I've started one here, and I just wanted to do this so I could show you how it's going to look. So we're going to be starting at the bottom here. Now I started with pink for this one. We're going to use the purple just to change it up a little bit. But my blanket is 6 rows of a color and then 2 rows of white in between each color. So we have some color blocking stripes happening here. So I did 6 rows of pink, 2 rows of white, 6 rows of blue, 2 rows of white, 6 rows of purple, and then I'll repeat. So I've kind of ended at this next area here, which will repeat with the pink. So I ended in a spot where farther along in the video, I'll show you how to switch colors and do this. Now, if you're doing yours all in one color, obviously you don't need to know that part, but when you do join a new ball of yarn, you will need to know how to do that part. So you can use that for both things. So what we're going to do first is begin, like I said, here at the bottom and work our way up. Now, we're going to work all the way to the halfway point, and then week 3 will be decreasing to finish up our square. So here's the bottom of our square right now, and we're working across and upward, okay? So I'm going to keep this kind of nearby here so we can use it as a reference as we work. So let me just scoot that over, and let's grab our yarn for today. So what we're going to do, if you've never done the corner to corner, if you have, that's wonderful. I know it's a very popular stitch, but I know also a lot of you have been asking me for a long time to do a tutorial on the corner to corner technique. So what we're going to do is start off and go very slowly, and I'm going to explain each step as we go along, and then later on we'll move on a little bit quicker, okay? So let's begin with the first part, the very bottom point here, and we're going to work upward and outward. Now again, week 3, we're going to bring the square back in and decrease to close it off, okay? So right now we're just working on that bottom expansion or increase part of our square. So what we want to do first is put a slip knot on our hook. Again, this is the K hook. So wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Then we're going to chain 6. Okay, so to make a chain, wrap yarn around hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the next thing we want to do is make a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop here does not count. So let's go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that chain right there, we're going to make a double crochet. To make a double crochet, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into that chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, okay? Then we're going to make a double crochet in the next chain. And then we're going to make a double crochet in the last chain, okay? So basically our first little block of our blanket is complete. That would be this first little block here. So then what we're going to do is once again chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we're going to once again work a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So again, this loop here doesn't count. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Wrap yarn around hook, insert it into that chain, bring up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, work a double crochet in the next chain, work a double crochet in the next chain, and we're back to that first little block that we made, okay? So this is where the magic happens. For some people I've seen it's a little bit tricky. So see how my tail is sticking straight up over here? We want to kind of turn this block so that this tail goes to the bottom. This is going to be the bottom point of our square, okay? Right here. We can reference back. This is this part, okay? So remember we made 3 double crochets. So we have 1, 2, 3 double crochets here. And then we have a turning chain, okay? So this double crochet right before you get to the turning chain, we're going to work a slip stitch right into that stitch, okay? So insert the hook into that stitch, bring up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, okay? So now what we're going to do is start building up. We're going to, this is actually considered row 2 because this is the bottom point. So what we're going to do now is chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now we have this turning chain. Remember this turning chain? We're going to work 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. So where that turning chain kind of arcs right here, it creates a space. That space right there is where we're going to work 3 double crochets this time. So we did a chain 3. And now we're going to go 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So your piece right now should look sort of like a heart. Okay? It looks very much like a heart. So what we're going to do next is, let me grab a little bit more of our yarn. And I chose the purple on purpose so there would be a lot of contrast with my white background here. So let's get some yarn out of the way. And then what we're going to do is move on to the next row. So if we look at our blanket here, you can see we have that first block done, and then there's 2 other blocks that kind of made that heart shape. Now we're going to move on to the 3rd row. So moving right along, what we're going to do this time is chain 6. So we're starting to kind of see a little bit of a pattern here. So chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to do the same thing we did before. In the 4th chain from the hook, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to work a double crochet. In the next chain, work another double crochet. And in the chain after that, work another double crochet. And then we need to get our piece aligned the way we need it. So you might have to kind of flip that upward. When I first learned how to do that, I found that to be a little bit tricky, but it's usually kind of pointing down like that. So you'll just need to flip it up. Now, one way you can keep track of that is, see this tail? Don't weave it in quite yet if you're learning how to do this. Always make sure that tail is flipped to the bottom so that it's facing you, okay? Then what we're going to do is, remember those 3 double crochets here? In that 3rd one, 1, 2, 3, that stitch at the top, insert your hook, bring up a loop. Now bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. We're joining with a slip stitch to close. Okay, so we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then once again, we're going to work 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you've made a corner to corner project before and you're kind of just following along with us, you'll know that this is a very addictive stitch. I have trouble when I'm making these putting it down. So once you've made your 3 double crochets in the turning chain space, what we're going to do once again is, remember those 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, that third one up, slip stitch to close, just like that. And then last time, chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We're putting another block up here, and then locate that turning chain space. See that space right there? Work 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. Now I wanted to mention we've come quite a long ways now. We have 1, 2, 3 blocks across the top. Okay, so let's move on to row 4. So what we're going to do is now, from this point on, really, we're just going to be repeating what we just did over and over and over again. But we're going to do a few rows together because I want everyone to be kind of on the same page, whether you've done this before or you're just learning. We're going to do a couple more rows together. Now, if you've already done this, you can kind of skip through this part and move on to the next section. But if you want to follow along, and if you want to slow down or rewatch some of it where I went much slower, I'm going to pick up a little bit of speed. So you can just back up the video just a little bit and watch it as many times as you like. You can pull it apart and even do it a few times if you like. So let's move on to the next row. I'm going to pick up speed a little bit because we're simply going to just be repeating this row from this point on. So what we're going to be doing is chain 6 once again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to turn our work. So count in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. Work that double crochet. So work a double crochet in the next chain and a double crochet in the next chain. Okay, and then the tricky part for some people, it's a little twisted, so we want to bring it back to where that tail's pointing down. And once again, that 1, 2, 1, 2, third double crochet up, we're going to join with a slip stitch at the top of that stitch. And then to move on to the next block, chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to do the same thing, work 3 double crochet in the turning chain space. Same thing we did in the row before. We're just adding more blocks because we're increasing every row. So our blanket is going to be getting taller and wider with every row we make. Okay, so we did our 3 double crochets, and then count that third double crochet up, work a slip stitch into that third one up, and then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Let me get a little bit more yarn. We're going to cruise through the yarn here, and then locate that turning chain space once again, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. We need to close, so count 3 up, join with a slip stitch, and once again chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochet in the turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so row 4 is complete, and you'll notice that we have 4 blocks. Row 4, 4 blocks, okay? So you can see our little square is starting to grow. Okay, it's growing sideways rather. So let's do one more row together, and then we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to grab my other project because I'm ready to add a new color to this project, and I'll show you how to change colors or change yarn balls, whatever situation you might run into. So let's make one more row together. Chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Count the 4th chain in, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Work a double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. Work a double crochet in the next chain, work a double crochet in the next chain. Now get your piece all situated by turning it ever so slightly So that tail is hanging down. And then we're going to count 1, 2, 3 double crochets up, insert and slip stitch, bring up that loop, just like that to close off that square, chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And I need a little bit more yarn. Then work 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. Now again, I'm picking up speed a little bit, so if you need to see this slower, just back up the video a little bit. We're going to join with a slip stitch in that 3rd double crochet, and then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Work actually 3 double crochet in the turning chain space once again. And so for the whole increase, the whole first half of your blanket, you're going to be doing the same thing, row after row. 1, 2, 3, join with a slip stitch, chain 3. 1, 2, 3, work 3 double crochet in the turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. And I have a little snag here, so let me just deal with that. It just kind of formed a little knot there. I think sometimes I spend half the time undoing knots. Okay, so we're all set. So we did our 3 double crochets. Now once again, we're going to join with a slip stitch to close our little box. And then we're at the very last box. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And then work 3 more double crochets in the turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we just completed row 5 and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks across. So what we're going to do now is switch gears a little bit. I'm going to grab my other project. This is the basic tutorial for our increase part of our blanket, okay? So let's slide this over, and I'm just going to grab my other project because we're going to switch gears here. Now, as you can see, I've put quite a bit more rows on this part, and again, we did 6 rows of one color, 2 rows of white to separate, 6 rows of the blue, 2 to separate, 6 rows of the purple, 2 rows of white to separate, and now we're ready to repeat the pink again. Okay, so go ahead and grab your scissors, and I ended right here on the end. So there are lots and lots of ways to join on a new ball of yarn or join on a new color. I like to just cut the yarn, fasten off, and tie the new one right on, but it's completely up to you. Okay, so if you have a preferred method for joining yarn, please feel free to do that. Okay, so what we're going to do is cut the yarn and fasten off. Now you're going to grab your next color, whatever that might be. Mine happens to be pink. And we're going to, in that last stitch where we just fastened off, we're going to insert our hook into that very last stitch. You'll see at the very corner of that block is a loop, okay? So insert your hook into that last stitch, bring the new yarn through, and we're just going to tie it right on. Now in week 4, I'm going to show you how to weave in all the ends if you're not familiar with how to do that, and we're going to add some finishing touches like some pom-poms, some really fun little pom-poms. And then what we can do is continue on with our project. Okay, so now we're ready to just continue right along like we've been working all along here. So reinsert your hook back into that same stitch where you just tied the yarn, bring up a loop, and then we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then what I like to do is kind of turn things a little bit. And then we're going to count that 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. Work your double crochet. If you notice, this is just repeating the rows that we've been doing. So that's 1, work a double crochet in the next chain, that's 2, work a double crochet in the next chain is 3. Now again, I want to mention once again that if you have a way of joining yarn that you prefer, please feel free to do that. This is your project and you should do whatever you like to do. Okay, so what we need to do is turn our work a little bit. Now that tail is way down here this time, so because our blanket has grown, well, this is actually the one we started with, but it's grown magically over time. And so we're just going to turn it a little bit, and then you can kind of pull that knot down if you need to. And we're going to once again count 1, 2, 3 of those double crochets up, insert the hook into that stitch, bring up a loop, and we're joining with a slip stitch. So bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and then we can continue across our row. Now our row is much longer this time because I switched projects on you, but we're just going to work it the same way. So let's work a little bit of the ways in, and then we'll be ready to go for next week. Okay, so what we're going to do is chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then work 3 double crochet into that turning chain space. So 1 and 2 and 3. Then we need to join with a slip stitch in that 3rd double crochet up there, just like that, and then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're just doing this all the way across. 3 double crochet in the turning chain space. 1, 2, 3. I really like the addition of the white 2 rows in between the colors. It really sets each color off and kind of isolates the bright colors, and it kind of frames them in. So I can't wait to see, and some of you have shown me pictures of what you've chosen. So keep those photos coming. They're all beautiful. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and work 3 double crochet into the turning chain space. So the only number you really have to remember is 3 chains up, 3 double crochets, and then a slip stitch. 3 chains up, 1, 2, 3, 3 double crochet into the turning chain space, and then a slip stitch all the way across. And then of course the chain 6 at the beginning of each row as we move along. Okay, so we're just going to do this all the way across. Let me do one more, and then 1, 2, 3, and then we can look at our handiwork here. 3 double crochet, okay, so I'm going to stop right here, and you can see how we've gone from one color to the next, and it looks really pretty, and it's starting to really come together. So with that being said, we're going to work our rows, repeating our rows and whatever color sequence you've chosen, and we're going to work our blanket. Now I know we're making lots of different sizes. We're making throws, lapgans, afghans, large for bed, and things like that. So what you want to do this week is make your blanket half the size you want it to be. So using up half the yarn that you want to use, make half of your blanket. So it'll be like you took a square and just sliced it down from one corner to the other. So make your blanket as large as you want to do. I'm going to simply, the yarn I talked about last week, I'm going to simply use up just half of my yarn, roughly half of my yarn. Now you'll have some odds and ends left over, and that is a perfect way to use up your yarn for the pom-poms. So if you want to add pom-poms to each corner of your blanket, which I definitely want to do, or tassels or whatever, or fringe, whatever you like to do. Some of the yarn odds and ends you can use for those types of things. So it won't be a perfectly, you won't use every last inch of the yarn, but roughly half of your yarn. Now, I wanted to give a quick little tip. If you're having trouble, now sometimes it's hard to look at a ball of yarn and say, okay, I've used half of my yarn. Try doing this. Before you start using your yarn, put it on like a kitchen scale. A bathroom scale might not be precise enough, but try putting your ball of yarn on a scale. Use your yarn up until you've used half of the weight of the original amount, and you can kind of get an idea of half of the ball of yarn that way. So if you're having trouble just kind of seeing that you've used half of it, try weighing your yarn first. So we're going to continue working our blanket, increasing. And then next week for week 3, I'm going to teach you how to bring it back in and decrease. It's super easy. Once you've mastered this, it's basically a lot of the same stuff. You're just going to be beginning the row slightly different, okay? So next week we're going to learn how to decrease. So keep sharing those photos. If you need any help, hop on over to the Ravelry group and ask questions. So many of you are so lovely to jump in and help each other. Show off your photos. If you need help, some people like to ask for opinions about different color combinations. And I've already shared last week the color palette suggestions. So some of you got some nice comments about that. And I hope those were helpful. So I will see you next week for week 3, and keep sharing those photos, and I'm going to work on my blanket as well. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.